Defense. We appreciate your willingness very much to appear before the Commission. Your prepared statements will be entered into the record in full, so if you could proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the Commission for inviting me today to testify. I shall try to summarize my testimony. My initial observation is a caution to remind you that intelligence is a very difficult business. Intelligence is not only supposed to gather facts, many of which others are attempting to conceal or disguise, and increasingly so, may I say in passing. It is also expected to provide a coherent picture that helps to prepare us for future developments. To be sure, few of us are clairvoyant. When events throw the inherent limitations of intelligence into bold relief, we are surprised and frustrated because intelligence has failed to predict the future. Intelligence is highly successful in dealing with routine developments. It is, however, particularly prone to failure at the turning points of history. It is perhaps obvious that the problems of intelligence become even harder when we deal with non-Western cultures, amplified when we are attempting to understand those who regard us as infidels. Nonetheless, I believe that we can do better in responding to terrorism. Till now, we have not been sufficiently strategic and long-term in our analytical efforts. We have relied too much on secret intelligence and too much on country expertise. When events do throw the inherent limitations of intelligence into bold relief, the immediate response is to seek the restructuring of the intelligence community in organization or in management. It is perhaps an American tendency to minimize inherent substantive problems and to believe that failures are failures of organization, which can be prevented by the right organizational solution. No one would question that management can always be improved, but major organizational change is not the salvation. I would submit that the real challenge lies in recruiting, fostering, training, and motivating people with insight, and when necessary, bring about long-term changes in the ethos of intelligence organizations. Intelligence is produced by normal human beings with their preconceptions, their habits of mind, their associations, and the like. Tinkering with the organizational structure can help, but by itself will not bring about a major improvement. Now, ideas regarding organizational reform have a long history. Over the years, there have been dozens of studies. I myself produced a study in 1971 at the behest of President Nixon, at a time that it was felt that the benefits of intelligence were not commensurate with the costs. And the central problem of intelligence was the quality of analysis. I recommended against the creation of a Director of National Intelligence because it would only dilute the role of the DCI without corresponding advantage. Instead, I urged that the DCI be given greater authority over the entire intelligence community, provide budgetary guidance and an overall plan, much of which President Nixon subsequently ordered. In 1982, I argued against proposed legislation that would have created an intelligence charter intended to rein in the intelligence community. That legislation would have established, in effect, a Department of Intelligence that would have combined intelligence assets scattered across the government. The point that I made then was that intelligence had to be oriented toward the consumers of intelligence, that agency heads and others needed to know and to trust the people that were providing intelligence, and that if intelligence was centralized in the prescribed manner, inevitably and surreptitiously, intelligence activities would be recreated in departments, agencies, and the several commands. Indeed, the widespread tendency to deplore duplication and to embrace the efficiency of centralization lasted only until one could see the consequences. Still, the urge to combine intelligence activities under central command and control continues to reappear. I urge this Commission to reflect on the long history involved and to refrain from recommending major surgery unless substantial improvement is to be obtained. It takes a while to settle down after surgery, and the disruptions that are inevitable are likely to distract us from the main goal, the improvement of the intelligence product. With regard to performance, one must seek to achieve two somewhat contradictory things. On the one hand, one must seek to engage the policymakers in the intelligence process so that they do more than read, if they do, the intelligent product or listen to the briefings. It is essential for good intelligence to understand the concerns of the policymakers so that both collection and analysis can focus on those concerns. At the same time, one must seek to avoid mixing intelligence and policy, even though in a complicated world that cannot be avoided entirely. Regrettably, that essential line frequently is crossed from either side. In this connection, one must understand the distinct role of the policymaker. Once he has decided, he must explain, that is, sell that policy to the public, the press, and the Congress. Intelligence unavoidably deals with shades of gray, not with black and white. But leaders cannot dwell on the uncertainties, the fuzzy evidence, the equivocations of intelligence. Leaders have to decide. When decisions are made, they are regularly hyped in the quest for public support. One can cite notable examples from the Roosevelt administration, from the Reagan administration, from the Clinton administration, if not in more recent years. All administrations will engage in the practice. In a democracy, administrations are obliged to seek public support. At the other end of this dichotomy, analysts cannot be Vestal virgins operating in an academic environment. If they want their product to be taken seriously by the policymakers, they must be prepared for some interaction. If the subject is relevant and the product is interesting, there should be questioning. Nonetheless, analysts all too frequently act like a bunch of college professors. How dare they challenge me? The analytic fraternity varies between two moods. In one mood, it is said that the policymakers pay no attention to what I write. There must be more interaction. In that second mood, the policymakers are interacting, and one hears the cries, "I am being pressured," or even attacked. In politics, those cries will attract attention. But one must bear in mind that the questioning is desirable. Nonetheless, it will regularly be described as pressure. Mr. Chairman, over the years, it has been recognized for this continuous need for interaction between the policymakers and the intelligence community. Efforts have been made in that direction. They have been brief, and they usually are terminated. It is only in periods of crisis that regularly we have the kind of interaction between the policymakers and the intelligence community that is most fruitful. Mr. Chairman, we all recognize that priorities must be adjusted over time. Particularly so is this so when there's a major change in the international scenes, such as there was after the collapse of the Soviet Union and subsequently with the rise of terrorism. Those are major turning points. Yet what is conceptually easy to accept remains difficult to implement in practice. Intelligence organizations are large bureaucracies. Particularly, they do not adapt immediately. Particularly, this is the case when there is little budget leeway and resources must be wrested away from others in the organization. In the late 1990s, for example, intellectually it was recognized that we were at war with the terrorists. Nonetheless, resources did not stream into counterterrorism to the degree that one might expect for a nation at war. The reason, of course, those resources had to be pried loose from other entities in the intelligence establishment, which stood ready to resist such loss of resources. After 9/11, we readily, if belatedly, recognized that more resources should have moved in accordance with the indicated change in priorities. That was easy to recognize in retrospect, though even now we are not creating the strategic framework for a long-term war. We must recognize that large bureaucracies do tend to become inbred and that inevitably there is resistance to new ideas, particularly those that come in from the outside. Though we cannot simply acquiesce in such behavior, we must recognize the difficulty of adaptation in large organizations. That is why we need to protect and to foster competition in analysis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.